Hello, Facebook friends, citizens of America and the planet, coming to you live from outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to tonight's Fireside chat. And just checking slightly different technology tonight, but I think we're good. So a lot to talk about tonight. It's been really a crazy, disturbing, totally off the charts week. 2 weeks really between the explosions or the near explosions on the Korean Peninsula and then the all-out crisis in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it's like, you know, we have this flare of fascism, we have this flare of militarism, and we're sort of getting this incredible whiplash. Which emergency, you know, should we deal with first? Which fire should we first try to put out? It's like the threats to our survival, to our democracy, to peace and security on the planet, to against the fascist threat. It's just incredible the speed at which this is coming. So I want tonight to just connect some of the dots here between this crisis of militarism, the crisis of racism, the crisis of fascism. And it may ring a bell. Remember, Martin Luther King pointed out that these three evils go together. That is militarism, racism, and extreme materialism. And bear in mind that fascism is actually, it's the mix of racism and militarism. Fascism is a radical and pathological political ideology that basically elevates authoritarianism, that elevates violence, that believes and practices racism and xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant, anti-women, anti-LGBT, you name it. Anti-people with disabilities. It's really an ideology of hate. And you put that together with militarism and you get fascism. So, you know, it's no surprise that we're seeing this flare now. We're seeing militarism flare on the Korean Peninsula, which is not an accident. It's really the final common pathway of a foreign policy based on economic and military domination. So you have an arms race, which is culminating on the Korean Peninsula, and you have a nuclear arms standoff, which is culminating. When the nuclear weapons treaties were signed a long time ago, the idea was that the nuclear nations were going to get rid of their nuclear weapons. That's the whole premise of non-proliferation. That is the idea that nuclear weapons don't spread into basically everybody's hands. They're extremely dangerous. They should be in no one's hands. So, you know, the countries of the world now have actually stood up to say, let's get rid of all of the nuclear weapons. And that is, in fact, what we should do. And fortunately, the people of South Korea, who I was just recently able to visit as part of a Solidarity peace delegation, hosted by over 100 civil society groups, in particular by the labor groups in South Korea, an amazing coalition which just got rid of their very corrupt and conservative president. They just impeached their president. We should be taking a lesson from them. But we were hosted by the people of South Korea who are standing up for democracy, for sovereignty, for peace, for demilitarization, for getting rid of the nuclear weapons, for a peace treaty between North and South Korea. They are not afraid of dealing with the North Koreans. It just so happens that they speak Korean, you know, so you can't fool them about what the dialogue has actually been and what's been going on there. And they are not afraid of North Korea. On the other hand, they are very afraid of Donald Trump getting us all into trouble. And remember, as Korea goes, we all go. It's not true what one of the senators said. I think it was Lindsey Graham, who was saying recently, oh, don't worry, if there's a war, it's going to be over there. Well, you know what? It's not okay if it's over there. There are 25 million people in Seoul, South Korea alone, just, you know, 20 miles or so from the border. who are going to be sitting ducks, and there are millions more people in North Korea and South Korea. It will be devastating if there's even a non-nuclear exchange of hostilities. But remember this, nuclear war doesn't stay where it is. And what we know now is that if there's an exchange of nuclear weapons, you unleash something called nuclear winter, which is basically so much debris gets tossed up into the atmosphere that you dim sunlight and you make it more like winter conditions year-round. And basically it's now understood that this reduces food production around the globe for years. So hundreds of millions of people will go up with that mushroom cloud. It's not limited to Korea. That's why there's a petition out there that I would love for you to sign now if you haven't already signed it. We'll be posting that link on this Facebook page. I'm calling it the People's Petition for Peace because this is a petition of people in South Korea, in the U.S. We're hoping to get Guam involved, Guam, which is in the target hairs as the U.S. territory from which these bombers are launched. They're very much in the target hairs. They want to demilitarize. They want to get rid of the bases. It's just been translated into Chinese and into Japanese. So we're opening this up to the vast numbers of people around the world who are saying to the military-industrial predators, we don't need your friggin' war, pack it up, let's negotiate. That's worked before with North Korea in the Cold War, with Iran. Negotiations are the way to go. So please sign that petition and then circulate it. Tell your friends about it. So we should have millions of people on this petition. There's a new set of war games that's going to get launched on, I believe it's the 21st of August. These war games are basically where the U.S. and South Korea rehearse dropping nuclear weapons on North Korea. We've been doing this for decades and threatening North Korea, in fact, with a nuclear attack. In fact, with a first strike, an unprovoked nuclear first strike. So it's no wonder that North Korea has felt compelled to develop nuclear weapons. But they have consistently said that if we will back off the nuclear threats, then they will back off of their missile and nuclear program as well. So this is a solvable problem. We should not be going to the brink of the mushroom cloud, with these threats that just that just get us into more trouble and that just accelerate this downward spiral. So there's the solution, okay, to the militarism in the long run, or I should say in soon after. We need to deal with the crisis in Korea first, but then we should be demilitarizing. All of us should be redirecting our resources and our dollars from this waste of military resources into greening our economies. We should be preempting the climate crisis and making the wars for oil obsolete by demilitarizing. That's the long term here. But the idea is let's build an international voice for peace. There's already plenty of international voices for war on the part of our oligarchies, on the part of the corporate giants. So let's get our voices out there as we, the people of the planet, the allied, everyday people of this earth, we the 99%. Let's get out there and let's make our voices heard. So please sign the People's Petition for Peace. You'll see it's in North Korean, rather it's in Korean and in English. You'll see it's a bilingual petition. It's on a Google Doc because it's actually hosted by our partners in South Korea. So it's not exactly the way some of us Americans are used to doing petitions. But let this be the first exercise, and let's do it fast because we need to stop. We should have millions of people signing to say, let's stop the next war exercises as a first step with North Korea to basically a freeze for a freeze. We freeze the war exercises, they freeze their missile program and their nuclear development. It'll get us started in the right direction. So please join us. And then on the emergency of fascism, let's be perfectly clear. This is not a matter of, the alt-right and, as Donald Trump puts it, the alt-left. There is no alt-left. There are fascists who were the aggressive and violent force in Charlottesville. There's no question about that. From observers, from the press that was there, from the videos that are shown. Take a look at the opening event on Friday night, where you had a couple hundred of these thugs walking around with racist and anti-Semitic, very violent chants with their torches, like the KKK, but without the shame of covering their faces. This is fascism that's been enabled and emboldened in this era of Donald Trump, shamefully. And, they went on from there. When people are coming to an event with batons, with automatic weapons, with shields, and with helmets, this is not a rally. This is basically a race riot, which they were there to instigate. And, credit to Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General, who actually called this what it was, which is actually a terrorist event, a white supremacist, racist terrorist event. We need to put a stop to them. And it is right and appropriate that the sponsoring groups should be investigated as terrorist organizations and should be barred, in my view, from holding events that are intended to instigate violence and instigate race riots. So I think it's a healthy thing. There are several colleges now in the wake of the violence this weekend who have actually then come out and said that they are not going to host some of the events on their campuses that are used to legitimize this neo-fascism, this threat to public health, public safety, and this threat to our democracy. It's really important for us all to stand up. And at the end of the day, the answer to fascism is, two things. So number one, it's democracy, and it's about getting together at the level of our communities and ensuring that we are there to stand by our vulnerable brothers and sisters, immigrants, people of color, Latinos, the elders, the disabled, people of Muslims, Jews, people of faith who are targeted by this right-wing extremism. As a community, we need to stand together, and we need to stand together for our human rights and our human values. It's important that we stand together for democracy, and it's important that we stand together against violence. And I'm sorry to say that the next big right-wing extremist event is happening in Boston, in my hometown. And the Green Party is one of many groups which are mobilizing to come out and say that there is no place for hate in our community. We're organizing together with a group called the May Day Coalition, and they currently have a Facebook page up that I encourage you to go to if you are in the Boston area or in the Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island area. Come out, because we need to stand together and stand strong. These fascists are few and far between. They come together from all across the nation, a couple of hundred of them, to try to flex their muscles. So it's really important that we, people who are standing up for our basic human values, which are American values, which are the values of people, planet, and peace over profit, we need to stand up and stand together for our values and our rights, our civil liberties, and our civil rights. That Facebook page is facebook.com/BostonMDC, as in May Day Coalition. So go to facebook.com/BostonMDC for May Day Coalition, and please join us. I regret that I am not going to be able to be there, but I am there in spirit. I'm actually having a little medical procedure on Friday, and I'm expected not to be out and about over the weekend, but I will be after that. So you will see me at the next one after that, I promise. Let's see, a couple other things. Donald Trump is really, what shall we say, showing his true colors right now. First, having come out with a very mealy-mouthed statement that, oh, you know, there's blame on all sides, as if human rights, you know, standing up for human rights is somehow the same as standing against human rights and against people of color and against Muslims and Jews and immigrants. And, you know, it's crazy talk. And it's wonderful that that talk has been disavowed across the political spectrum by Republicans. Mitt Romney even tweeting that these are two different universes. You cannot put them on the same moral territory. This is absolutely crazy making. And isn't it interesting that even the CEOs on Donald Trump's two major policy advisor groups have basically quit, and they quit in such numbers that out of embarrassment he was basically forced to dismiss these groups preemptively because everybody was quitting one after the other. It was really quite astonishing, you know, and that was Intel. It was Kenneth Frazier, the CEO of Merck, an African-American himself, who very courageously, he was one of the first people to step down. Actually, before him, it was Elon Musk from Tesla who stepped, you know, who basically quit after Trump conducted his, you know, his insane policies on climate and withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. So, you know, it's really amazing. There was a poll that came out today as well, you may not have heard about it yet, saying that, you know, the American people by majority disapprove of Trump's handling. Because first he had this mealy-mouthed, oh, they're kind of the same. And then he came out with this carefully written statement approved by his new chief of staff, I'm sure, John Kelly, the military man who's supposed to be bringing order to the meltdown in the White House. And John Kelly, you know, clearly had a hand in that statement, which said the right thing, and it condemned the fascists and the white supremacists and the racists. But then just yesterday, Donald Trump did another flip and, you know, made it clear that the guy is sort of clueless and that he says what he thinks is right at the moment, but there is no moral fiber, there is no moral compass there, there is no sense of politics or democracy or human rights to guide this very lost and unfortunate sick soul. So we've sort of seen the real Donald Trump, and people are peeling away from him madly. So again, I would say his days are numbered. Sit tight. This is a very perilous time for America, for the world, for the planet. But let's stay the course. I think Republicans are increasingly finding that he is a liability coming up in the 2018 elections, and we may still see impeachment proceedings happen sooner than you could have possibly imagined. So let's see. Here's Mitt Romney's statement. No, not the same. One side is racist, bigoted, Nazi. The other opposes racism and bigotry. Morally different universes. For once, I agree with Mitt Romney. I think many of us do. So a couple of shout outs. Austin Bashore says, hi Jill, I'm going to Korea on Sunday and will be there for 11 months. How do I get in contact with the Korean Greens? If you speak Korean, I know that they are on the website and you can certainly find them by Googling them, but I will see if I can post something for you on our Facebook page. So good question. Daquan Harrison says, Jill, thanks for being great. Daquan from Michigan. So I think that's the Daquan that I know, a very courageous young man who is leading the fight for youth, for affordable college education, for Black Lives Matter, and for racial justice. So I want you to know, Daquan, I am with you because this young man I believe is being targeted, if this is the Daquan I am thinking of, is actually being targeted for his work. So I will be standing with you, Daquan, and making sure that you are not targeted for being the courageous voice that you are. Thank you so much. Keep up your wonderful work. Adam Williams. Hi, Dr. Stein from Indiana. Thank you for standing up for us little guys. Thank you, Adam. Glad to be one of you. Austin Bashore. I'm a U.S. Green in South Korea. Thank you so much. Okay, cool. Elaine Vario. NYC loves you. I love you back. Kathy Temple Carlston. Hello from Iowa. Devlin Wade. Good morrow, Jill. You're spot on, hitting the ground running. My husband is stationed in Charlottesville. It worries me greatly, and I immensely appreciate your diligent work, your input, and your solidarity. Hashtag, I love our fireside chats. I love hearing from you, Devlin, and thank you so much for you for your support and for your husband's support, and I wish him safety. And I do want to acknowledge also, speaking of people in service, I want to acknowledge also the 2 police officers whose lives were lost, in addition to Heather Heyer, who was the victim of the white nationalist violence at that event. I also want to acknowledge the police officers whose lives were tragically lost. It's really inexcusable and shameful that these events of hate, these expressions of violence, have these kinds of repercussions. By the way, we will be posting on this Facebook page a site that you can donate to in order to support the victims and their families and their medical costs from the terrible violence that took place in Charlottesville. So here are some questions. Logan Gunther says, what can we do then? Organize. Absolutely. You know, for the peace issue, sign the people's petition for peace. It's not only an expression right now, instructions to our political misleaders to put your weapons down, put your war drums down and sit down and negotiate. It's a set of instructions to them, but also this is a process of building a coalition across borders to stand up together for peace and for human rights. Wherever there is a struggle for peace, there's also a struggle for human rights, and there are courageous people who are leading both of these struggles. So that's one part. Another, I think, is to get together with your community and strengthen democracy in your community. Democracy is the answer to fascism. And if the fascists come to town, we need to be there in huge numbers to make clear that we are standing by the human rights of our communities, by the people of color, the immigrants, the Muslims, the Jews, the LGBTQ community. We are standing tall, we're standing together. The students, the elders, the disabled. We are a community. The answer to fascism is community. And in fact, if you go upstream a little bit, where did we get to this right-wing extremism? We got to it because everyday people, especially working people, have been thrown under the bus. When that happens, it makes people very vulnerable to demagogues and extremism. This is always the backdrop to right-wing extremism, to Nazism, to white supremacy. So we need to also advance a radical progressive agenda that provides our health care, that provides education as a human right, that bails out students, that bails out young people who should not pay the price of lifelong debt in order to get a college education, in order to get a job and survive in the economy. We can solve this. And by demilitarizing, we unleash so many resources that we have all the money we need in order to meet these needs, to create these jobs, to green our economy, to create overnight green energy and green food system. Let me throw in another word of encouragement, we can also solve the climate crisis. You may not have heard about this, but there's more good news in the pipeline here. That is, it's now well established, and this has just been over the last few years, it's been really well established that if, in fact, we convert to what's called regenerative agriculture, that is organic agriculture, but also that uses rotational crops and rotational grazing. It's basically putting animals on the land because animals eat the food, and then in their manure they basically tramp the carbon back into the soil. So it's been found that nature has a really powerful natural system for what's called sequestering carbon. It takes the carbon out of the air and gets it back into the ground where it is supposed to be. And by using these techniques of our organic no-till agriculture, the roots essentially hold on to that carbon and insert it deep into the soil. By converting to regenerative agriculture, it turns out we can get rid, over the course of 1 year, of all the carbon that we currently emit. In other words, the equivalent of what we're now burning, we can actually get into the soil. So by converting as an emergency to 100% clean renewable energy, and at the same time converting to 100% regenerative agriculture, which is actually more productive and more stable and more nutritious, we do the right thing all around, and we can reverse the trend towards climate change. We can actually pull down carbon from the atmosphere. There's some very good articles on this. Jim Hansen himself, who is the lead spokesperson for climate science, his most recent article, and we can post this also on our Facebook page, identifies regenerative agriculture as a key tool that we have to use now, in addition to greening our energy system. So those are some of the things we can get involved with. Get involved with your green candidates, because these candidates actually bring these policies to bear at the local level as well as at the state level. Running for school committee, for example, Greens will bring not only the solar rooftop energy into our communities, which can be advanced as a program within the school system, but we can also bring farm-to-school programs in our schools so that we begin to implement regenerative agriculture right now in our communities. So there's no end to good solutions. These solutions are available. The weak link in the chain is just our political power. And the key to asserting our political power is deciding to do it and having the courage of our convictions and realizing, as Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. So by knowing we have that power and by using that power, we can actually create the world we need, an America and a world that works for all of us. It really is within our reach. Couple more quick questions here. Patricia Augustine, hi from New Jersey. Please, if you can, have Seth Caperdale back on. We're trying to get him in the debates. Let me give a shout out right now for Seth Caperdale, who is the candidate for governor from New Jersey. He's one of only 2 governor races, or he's a part of only 2 governor races across the whole country. So if you don't have a governor's candidate in your state, this is one of the most influential races that you can be a part of, and you can be a part of it. You can go to give support to that campaign. You can donate to that campaign on his website, and we will post that website. And you can also help out, whether you live in New Jersey or not. You can help out by lending a hand to the phone banking. So you can join the volunteers just by going to Seth's website. He's a fabulous candidate, and he's got to raise over $400,000. He may be almost halfway there right now. So if everybody listening to this throws in $5, we will get him a whole lot closer just in the course of a couple hours. So please support Seth Caperdale. Scott Parker says, Aloha from Maui. I was so proud to have voted you in this past election. I only wish the country would have gone green in 2016. Much love and aloha to you. And back to you, Scott. Stephanie Jimenez says, hi from California. From California City. Okay, some city in California, not sure which. But hi back to you, Stephanie. So here's some questions. Logan Gunther says, let's see, we actually got to that. James Lee Clark says, where do you stand on Antifa? And Antifa is a group that believes in standing up to fascism, as we all should. So, I think in the big sense, if you're not a fascist, you are against the fascists. And it's not like choose a side, it's like one is the side of human rights, the other, and democracy. The other is the side against human rights. It's the side of gas chambers. It's the side of genocide. It is the side of creating, an Aryan nation all over the world. So it's not like there's a side to choose here, but there is a small group known by the name of Antifa, which believes in coming equipped for a fight. And, there's a variety of opinions about this. Let me just say that Cornel West spoke out. He was in Charlottesville and was part of a small group of clergy that he says were almost killed there. They were surrounded by the fascists and were being threatened in a very terrifying way until, he says, a group of Antifa came there, like 300 or 350 of Antifa and anarchists came and basically rescued them. So, I just want to acknowledge that we are under threat, and we do need to stand up to that threat. Exactly where to draw the line, I think is a public discussion. There are respectable viewpoints here. I myself, I subscribe to nonviolence, as the Green Party officially subscribes to, but I also recognize that you have to be able to defend yourself when you are threatened with violence. And I do believe also that it's not okay when we have a climate march, we're told we can't bring even wooden poles to a climate march. How is it that when the fascists have a march, supposedly they're allowed to bring automatic weapons and and all sorts of other manners of shields and helmets? They're preparing for a fight, and that's not okay. So, personally, I believe in disarmament and nonviolence, and I think that's the way we need to go in our communities, and that's the way we need to go globally. Abdul Jones says, there is no either or on the issues. We need to focus on all of them. Everyone can do something. Let me agree with Abdul. I think you can't just separate out one issue and just fight the fascists. We also have to stop the militarism. We have to stop the plunder of the climate. We cannot survive by bread alone. We got to survive by many systems, and we got to survive by our democracy and standing up for all of them. And in standing together, we discover, guess what? We got critical mass. We got all the numbers that we need in order to win the day. Pablo Ortega says, hi, Jill, we were waiting for your voice about this terrible thing. And what is more important behind this crime? Racism and intolerance, tolerated and even feeding by the government. Agree with you, absolutely, Pablo. It's no surprise. In an age of great economic stress, the diseases of despair are skyrocketing right now. That is suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction, opioid overdoses. They're absolutely skyrocketing at unprecedented numbers. This goes hand in hand with an economy that still throws everyday people under the bus. Yes, the jobs came back, but they are overwhelmingly low-wage, insecure, part-time jobs. So the economic crisis is still here for most people, and working people are taking it on the chin. That's exactly the setting in which people become very susceptible to demagoguery, especially if they're hearing it from people who are supposed to be expressing our national values, our shared human values. And the White House, as you know, is occupied by neo-fascists, by white supremacists and racists. And we need to be rid of all of them. And as a first step, Steve Bannon and what's his name, Sebastian Gorka and Stephen Miller, they should all be fired. They should be laid off, like tonight, from the White House. And we should proceed towards impeachment proceedings on many counts. So we should be rid of this government that is nurturing fascism. I'll take one or two more here, and let me ask you to please like this conversation, share this conversation. Let's get the word out. The answer to fascism is community. The Green News Network is about making those community voices heard. There are some exciting plans in the works, by the way, for the Green News Network, so stay tuned. We'll be featuring a number of new programs coming up in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. So Christy Sumner-Rue says, question, how do we help people, particularly white people, especially in the South, like North Carolina where I live, understand how Confederate monuments are permanent reminders of systemic racism and not just historical monuments? That's a great question, Christy, and a very important question. I personally am convinced that this has everything to do with a frank discussion about racism, how racism still lives. The legacy of slavery lives in a very painful and devastating way right now. It's no coincidence that the average African American family now has 5 cents of wealth and resources compared to the average Caucasian family, which has $1. So for every dollar that a white family has, an African American family has been able to accumulate 5 cents. Right? This has everything to do with the living legacy of racism and redlining, with government policies as well as private policies that have segregated housing and schools and education and denied opportunity from the get-go. When slavery was first abolished, originally there was this idea that there would be, 5 acres and a mule, something, I forget how many acres, but there was going to be land and resources provided as compensation to the slaves. But that didn't happen, and they basically then faced Jim Crow and then, and then segregation and then the drug wars and then police violence and mass incarceration. It's been one epidemic after the other. It's really important for us to come to terms with that and understand the living legacy of the criminal institution of slavery and to understand how much devastation and hurt goes along with these monuments, which in my view should not be maintained as public monuments. We should not be worshiping and paying homage to symbols of genocide, which is essentially what it is. Couple more quick ones here. When the left fails, and this is from Caleb Evans, when the left fails to provide the policies we need, the right fills the vacuum. Exactly. Well said. Thank you. Sean Russell, right GOP and left DNC, both heads connected to the same snake. Third party is a must. That and voting oversight reform. Beautiful. That's why I love this fireside chat. I love having this conversation because you all say it so well. Thank you so much, Sean and Caleb and everybody else who's chiming in here. Imelda Barranco, wow, nuclear winter prevents food production. Exactly. That's why it's not okay. That's why we've got to get rid of the nukes. That's why it's really wonderful. The majority of the world's nations have voted to do so. There is now a new nuclear treaty, which you notice our fearless misleaders are not even mentioning. Nuclear weapons are becoming illegal world over. It's like the global treaty against landmines or, against the what are they called? Cluster bombs, There are just the right things to do. We need to be getting rid of nuclear weapons. That will make the whole crisis on the Korean Peninsula go away. That's the elephant in the room. It doesn't need to be there. It shouldn't be there in the first place. Ren Tosh says, we're having a peace rally on the 20th in Denver. That's awesome. Ren, I hope you will get the word out to your network. The 20th is a very important day because it's the day before the next round of these so-called military exercises, which are basically a dress rehearsal for a nuclear attack on North Korea. So tell them about the petition, get them to sign the petition. Let's get the word out to as many people as we can, and let's try to stop those military exercises before they begin. Farley Gordon, so the solution is letting North Korea become a nuclear power? Actually, no, the solution is all of us becoming unnuclear powers. That is the only solution here in the long run. And actually, North Korea has historically been forced to become a nuclear power in order to survive. It's really been bullied into that position. So what we're saying is, let's all put away the nuclear arms. Let's get rid of them. Let's start with the Korean Peninsula, and let's go on from there. But we also need a peace treaty in Korea between the North and the South, which the North and the South are pretty interested in doing. And we've got to let, the U.S. needs to allow this to move forward. We have been, what shall we say, an occupying military force for quite some time. So there are ways forward. The Koreans are not afraid of doing this. Let's give them the support to make that happen. Hernan Tazes said, Jill, what do you think of posturing politicians denouncing the knucklehead fascists while providing cover and enabling Israeli fascism and racism? Why do some on the left, the majority, denounce racial supremacy but are completely clueless or silent regarding their supremacist nation? So let me agree with Hernan that this is a huge problem, that the militarism that we actually fund in Israel is unacceptable. The militarism, the state of apartheid, and the violence being perpetrated, the human rights that are being devastated among the Palestinian people are absolutely unacceptable. One of the people I hope to have on soon is an Israeli who has become an advocate for Palestinian human rights. His name is Miko Peled, and he himself comes from an Israeli elite military family. And what his father, who was one of the generals who actually founded Israel through the battles that were fought, he was part of the, what was it, the 1960-68 war? I forget when it was. I think it was 60, actually. The war that expanded Israel's boundaries. His father, the general, discovered that, oh my God, the same thing was being done to the Palestinians that had been done to the Jews. And his father, at that point, began to advocate for the human rights of the Palestinians, that they should not be treated like, like a dehumanized group of people. And so Miko Peled has basically followed in his footsteps, is a very persuasive advocate for Palestinian human rights. And that is very much the route that we need to follow. And we need to ask that Israel put away its arms and begin to respect the human rights of the Palestinians and really move forward in totally transforming its policies as well. So let me finish up here. Sean Russell says, Charlottesville police assured that this happened. They stood down. Shouldn't we be attacking that manner of incompetence, really? So what was going on there? I think, the question really needs to be asked. Why did so many police back off? Why did police stand there while people were being beaten up and just attacked? And there are multiple testimonies about this happening. And whether the police have been infiltrated by right-wing groups or exactly what is going on, I don't know. But I want to underscore what Sean has said there, that this has been widely recognized, not only in Charlottesville, but in many other areas as well. This did not happen in Boston, I must say, and I want to give a thank you to the Boston police when the racist supremacists came to Boston. I believe it was April for the last time. they were there keeping the peace, and thank goodness for that. I hope they are doing that as well on Saturday. And the police should be doing that. They should be protecting us. But I also want to put out the question, why are we allowing people to come to rallies that are supposed to be nonviolent? They're not supposed to be race riots. Why are we allowing white supremacists to come fully armed and often carrying weapons? And that may depend a lot on state laws and you know, these open carry lawed states. But, you know, why should people be allowed to bring weapons that aren't open either? You know, if climate marchers are prohibited from bringing sticks on which to carry our banners, why should the racists be allowed to carry knives and guns and batons? You know, I think there's a lot to be said for disarmament here. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. And again, I just want to leave you with gratitude that you're standing up, gratitude that you're tuned in tonight, gratitude for getting this message out, that we the people actually do have the answers from Charlottesville to Korea. We can stop fascism, we can stop militarism, we can stop racism. This is about lifting up our grassroots voices for democracy, for justice, and for peace, for standing tall, knowing that when we stand together, we have all the numbers we need. Together, we are unstoppable. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us. Please check out, if you're in the Boston area, the Facebook page for the Saturday rally to stand up in solidarity and peace, together standing up for immigrant rights, for the LGBTQ community, for peace and negotiations and no war in Korea. And that's facebook.com/BostonMDC, like May Day Coalition. So support your local coalitions, support your local Green Party and your local Green candidates. And thank you again so much for tuning in tonight. Green news is good news. See you next week. Take care.